So we got, Alhamdulillah, a very, very special program today. As you can see, our format is not our normal default format, even with Dr. Umar. So we have a very special guest with us today, uh, Captain Dan Hanley. Now, do you call yourself a captain because you have something to do with ships?
No, I call myself a captain because I'm a retired airline captain. So I should
Oh,
have put
airline. Okay,
retired.
I got
Yes,
it.
yes, yes. So, um,
Can you
yeah,
please
that.
introduce yourself to
Oh,
my audience?
sure. I currently serve as director and international public spokesperson for a global grassroots effort called 9/11 Pilot Whistleblower, consisting of pilots and others around the world, whose purpose is to show that there were no Muslim hijackers at the controls of the 9/11 aircraft, but that they were electronically hijacked through a system called the uninterruptible autopilot, which enables a remote source to take complete control of the aircraft's autopilot and flight management computers and drive the aircraft to their targets. And once this system is engaged, the pilots can no longer disconnect it. So that's what we're doing. Uh,
Okay,
we,
that's pretty cool, pretty interesting.
Yes,
Um,
I'll give you a little bit of background on my flying experience. I commenced flying over 50 years ago in 1968. First as a civilian pilot at age 19, I got my private commercial instrument and multi-engine rating before going on to school to get an applied math degree. And then 1973, when I graduated from college, the Vietnam War was still raging, so I had to make service plans.
I was born 1973.
No, you're making me feel old now. uh, any, anyhow, I had to make service plans, so I chose naval aviation. And after flying three different training aircraft there, I spent the next 10 years flying the four-engine P-3 Orion aircraft, which was used during the Cold War to track Soviet subs. And in 1978, I was hired by United Airlines as a pilot. And over the course of 25 years there, I flew 7 different aircraft. So over a career span of 35 years, I flew 20 different aircraft. I'm sorry, 15 different aircraft, accruing over 20,000 flight hours.
That's so interesting. So, can I ask you, what do you see the future of airlines now?
Bleak. Yeah, that's part of our problem. Part of our program is to recruit pilots from around the world who will back the assertion I just made. And with 70% of the pilot workforce out of a job, it's very difficult to interest them in an event that occurred 19 years ago, because they're scrambling for financial survival right now. So
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever see the return to what we once had in the industry.
Hmm. So,
But I'd just like to make a statement based on my experience. Uh, I I can say unequivocally, without reservation or embarrassment, that I could not have flown the 9/11 flight profiles at those speeds and altitudes that those hijackers allegedly flew, and neither could they. And that's what we're trying to prove with our organization. And I might add, we have a website, and I'd like to go through some of the material on that. It's
absolutely.
at 911pilots.org, and we have a YouTube channel at 911 Pilots. So we've got a lot of interesting information on there, and I can go through some of that as we go on here.
Absolutely.
Captain Dan, can I interject here?
Absolutely, yes.
You mentioned this pilot override system. It's obviously it's autonomous, and if I understand you correctly, once it's engaged, the pilot cannot retake control of the aircraft. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Let me tell you, the stated design purpose of this system was to prevent would-be hijackers from commandeering a commercial jet aircraft in flight by remotely taking control of it and guiding it to one of 108 airports in the world for an auto landing. But we know the system was developed prior to 9/11, and it could equally be used to guide airplanes to crash into buildings, because most people aren't aware that the modern navigation systems on these commercial jets is derived from cruise missile technology. It's very accurate. Whatever it's programmed to do, it'll do it with pinpoint accuracy.
My God.
And so,
Then, go ahead.
No, Dr. Omar, you come first.
What pilot in their right mind would enter a plane that they cannot recommandeer?
Well, that's very interesting, because I contend that about 99% of the pilots aren't even aware that this system exists, even though it's on the internet. I mean, every single pilot we've contacted, we have to educate them on the system. And when it's their aha moment, like I had in 2006 when I first discovered the system, that's how they did it. That's how they commandeered these airplanes. So, no, if you Google Boeing Honeywell uninterruptible autopilot, you'll get a Wikipedia article, and it's somewhat misleading because it states that it was patented by Boeing in 2006 after 9/11. But the reality is we have proof that the system was developed as late as 1996, 1997, in a recorded interview by an avionics technician who actually worked on the system. So we know it's in place, and I'm going to jump around now on the website to give you some background information. We have a drop-down menu on the website, and one of the pages is entitled Remote Control. And if you go to that, as far back as 75 years ago, in 1944, towards the end of World War II, the U.S. military conducted what is called Operation Aphrodite.
Captain, if you can just repeat that website that you're on one more time, just for my audience to see.
Sure. 911pilots.org.
Okay, thank you.
So over 75 years ago, towards the end of World War II, the U.S. military launched Operation Aphrodite, and what they did was get out old B-24s and to lessen the weight of these aircraft, and then they loaded them with 30,000 pounds of a substance called Torpex, which was a highly incendiary compound. Now, pilots were required to make the takeoff, but once they got airborne, they'd bail out of the aircraft. Well, the aircraft was an aircraft overhead would remotely guide the aircraft to the targets in Europe and crash them. This is your first example of a military drone aircraft. And we mentioned that JFK's older brother, Joe, was killed on one of these top secret missions when, due to a malfunction, the aircraft blew up before he bailed out. Now, we're only citing on the website 2 instances of remote controlled aircraft. The second one being 40 years later in 1984, due to rapidly advancing technology. The FAA and NASA conducted this joint crash test experiment in a remote location. And what they were doing was testing crew and passenger survivability in the event of a crash landing. And they took a large 4-engine Boeing 720 commercial jet aircraft without pilots and passengers. They just had crash dummies on board with cameras. And the aircraft was remotely guided to take off without pilots, fly around the pattern several times, and auto land before intentionally being crash landed. And we got a film on there that's about 5 minutes showing that this had happened. And I just mentioned, you jump ahead 2 decades, the mid-90s, this uninterruptible autopilot system was developed. And there's a 45-minute audio recording of this interview that I was just talking about by the pilot, another grassroots group, Pilots for 9/11 Truth, co-founder Rob Balsamo, of this seasoned avionics technician, who actually admitted that he worked on this system. So,
wow,
it's out.
So I'm on your website, and it says something very interesting. It says that even skilled pilots couldn't do this on the website.
Yeah. Omar, if you go to the home page on the website, up to the upper right-hand corner, and you scroll down to the first video that you come to there, it's an excellent 5-minute video where former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura interviewed. But what they did was attempted to replicate this exact procedure of the plane that struck the Pentagon American 77, and even seasoned pilots couldn't perform the maneuver without crashing the simulator. So if you look at the just above that, if you look at the flight profile that purportedly was flown by Hani Hanjour, a Saudi Arabian who supposedly flew American Flight 77. The aircraft was reported of conducting a descending and accelerating 330-degree corkscrew turn just west of the Pentagon from 7,000 feet, and he arrived precisely at ground level without striking the surface at nearly 500 miles per hour to strike the Office of Naval Intelligence. So this guy supposedly accomplished this on the first attempt. And I mentioned that these pilots crashed the simulator. There was, in fact, one experienced captain who on his 20th try managed to just hit the building, not at ground level. He just struck the building. But the target that day, we assert, was the Naval Intelligence Center. So,
okay, Captain, let me interrupt you here.
Sure.
I'm very curious about this now. Has this system ever been used to actually save an aircraft?
No. But no, it has not.
I didn't think so.
No.
So, question number 2. They've been using this system or this kind of system for decades. We're talking a long time now.
Right.
We're talking 40 to 50 years. They've been using autopilots as a weapon. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, now you can go. Go ahead, Doctor.
Who in their right mind would do this and not tell anybody?
Well, the people that planned and executed 9/11 were not in their right mind. They were subhumans.
There we go. All right. Well, that's my way of thinking.
No.
And now you're entering. I see. I'm guiding you right into my field of expertise. You see, these subhumans. Who do you think developed this stuff?
Well, I don't have the patent history on it. Another pilot does that introduced me to this in 2006. But he claimed that GE was actually involved, as were a number of other contractors. So I wish I could have him on the program with me because he's so much better versed than I am on this system. But there were a number of people. Now, I appeared twice on Malaysian TV for a brief spot. I was asked to come on to talk about this uninterruptible autopilot, and one of the things I was talking about was Malaysia Air 370. And if you're not familiar with that incident, or if you don't recall, several years, Malaysian Air 370, a Boeing 777, mysteriously disappeared over the Indian Ocean. Now, if you look at the flight profile of that aircraft, it veered wildly off course, just like the 9/11 aircraft did. Its aircraft transponder used by air traffic control to identify it was turned off, and the communications were turned off. And they never found any wreckage save one piece that didn't have the serial number to match that piece to the aircraft. So I alleged on that program that the uninterruptible autopilot was in fact employed. There's Malaysia Air 370. Then I was invited back on also to discuss the exponential rise of Islamophobia and the aftermath of 9/11, and I did another video on that. So if you go to my YouTube channel at 9/11 Pilots, I say mine, it's ours. There's a number of people working with me. You'll see those 2 videos there, and you can watch them. They're real sharp.
So if I can ask you, a lot of Muslims are pretty afraid to talk about this because even if they feel it in their heart, they tend not to speak their mind because they feel that they're already being targeted. And then there's this like, oh, you'll be like, like conspiracy theorist type person. What would you say to a Muslim, particularly considering we were the biggest victims of this? And we are the ones that are most scared to speak our mind about this. At least some of us, I would say.
Muslims were the target.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, at the bottom of the website, why is 911pilots.org doing this? And it's exactly, it's not just for the 2,977 victims that were murdered in the U.S. or this over 6,000 that were injured, but it's for the millions of Muslims and others who were murdered, maimed, or displaced in the Middle East and South Asia as a result of these illegal and unwarranted invasions based on the lies of 9/11. So we're trying to expose the lies. We're trying to say there were no Muslim pilots involved, and it blows the holy hell out of the official narrative.
So Madam Albright's 500,000 innocent Iraqi children were part of the targeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, so well, that was prior to 9/11, but that's correct. I mean,
well, this has been an ongoing plan for quite some time,
right?
Prior to 9/11, yeah.
I don't know if either one of you are familiar with the Project for a New American Century, but it's neocon Zionist think tank that was established by two neocons, Bill Kristol, and I can't remember the other. But in 1998. They signed a joint letter that they sent to Bill Clinton in January of that year, begging him to invade Iraq and overthrow Saddam Hussein. And 5 years later, they got their wish. Now, if you jump ahead to
Captain Dan, I completely remember because I was so interested in their website that they used to have. Yeah. With their memos and their memorandums going to the senators and everything. And I realized that their memos about Iraq were there way before everything happened. And so that was pretty interesting.
Well, if you jump ahead to the year 2000, there's another dual U.S. Israeli Jewish citizen that's been in the Defense Department since the Reagan years, named Dov Zakheim, and he's an interesting character to look at. But because he authored a paper called Rebuilding America's Defenses, and I don't remember the subtitle on it, but in this paper, he called for the need for a new Pearl Harbor. Now, this is exactly 1 year prior to 9/11. He called for the need for a new Pearl Harbor to garner public support for increased military spending for future military advances around the world. And 1 year later, they got their new Pearl Harbor.
What was the name of the title of the article?
Rebuilding America's Defenses, and I wish I could remember the subtitle. But Dov Zakheim is an interesting character because he was CEO of a company called System Planning Corporation before 9/11, and this company developed a system called the Flight Termination System, which incorporated an uninterruptible autopilot. And what its stated design purpose was to abort, say, an example, a missile test launch of a missile that misfired. There you go. That they could blow the thing up or parachute it to a landing. Well, there's an author out there named Rebecca Roth who's authored 3 books on 9/11, and she contends that the same flight termination system was used to guide aircraft to their targets. Now, 4 months before 9/11, Dov Zakheim was appointed by Bush as the comptroller to the Pentagon. Well, 1 day prior to 9/11, Don Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, announces that $2.3 trillion had gone missing from the Pentagon budget. And guess where American Flight 77 hit? The Office of Naval Intelligence that housed the budget analyst's office where they were investigating this missing 2.3 trillion. Well, trillion were over 30 budget analysts were murdered and their records destroyed. So he went on.
Something similar happened in the World Trade Center as well, isn't it?
Yes, they believe that certain certain floors of the building were targeted by those aircraft. And I'm not well versed on discussing that, but I will say that that's how accurate the navigation systems on those airplanes are. I said it's cruise missile technology. If you can get an altitude, an airspeed, and a path or a track to the target, that's where the airplane's going.
My gosh.
So, Dr. Omar, this then becomes an obligation on us Muslims to stand up and talk about this, because risk then potentially a lot more pilots, a lot more human beings. So, done to the Muslims, I think just as a religious obligation, it would be, if we don't question 9/11, then that gives them a reason to do it again and again.
It is the case. I confronted this when I was in academia in Malaysia, and there were conferences in which I wasn't exactly famous there, but I was known. Okay, and if I did something, people looked. Okay, and I remember attending a conference held by one of the leading academic institutions in Kuala Lumpur, and they were holding a conference on 9/11 at the time, and this was about 8 years after the fact, so we're looking at 2009 or so, and I was in attendance, and they had the whole stage filled with Muslims who were blaming Muslims for the event even then. It was well known by that time amongst people who think, outside the program boxes, that Muslims had nothing to do with it. And I stood up and I made a very definite point of standing up at a juncture when everyone in the audience looked at me. I looked at the audience, I looked at the stage, I looked at them stone cold hard for about 10 seconds. Then I turned my back and walked out slowly, as if I was in a procession, okay? Because this is, I didn't have the right to speak there, but I had that right. And that was my my action to, I was offended by their stupidity, okay, first off, because the people on the stage actually believed what they were saying. The host of the event were Jesuits.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, it was a Jesuit institution. Okay, so they were promoting this dialogue 8 years after the event, knowing that Muslims did not do it. Okay, so this is a scripted text that Dan is exposing. Okay, the whole thing is a stage act, and I'm interested to find out more about the incidents that may have preceded 9/11, such as these incendiaries, because this is news to me. These incendiary flights. This is a new. I didn't know about this, Dan. Thank you for telling us. If you have any more information about that, because it seems to me that these things would be used for terrorist activities prior to 9/11. It only stands to reason.
Let me tell you what the organization's doing in coordination with other groups out there, grassroots 9/11 groups. There's on that homepage, Omar, if you go to it, there's a group it's a grassroots group, and it's comprised of a group of lawyers in the U.S. called the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. And what they did was get together with the biggest 9/11 whistleblowers in the world, and they compiled 57 evidence packages and presented them to the U.S. Attorney in New York and compelled him to convene a grand jury investigation into their allegations that World Trade Center Building 1, 2, and yes, there was a third building, Building 7, the Solomon Brothers building, were brought down by controlled demolition. Now, the Justice Department, they've convened the grand jury, but there appears to be no movement on it. And if they can get their evidence and their witnesses in there, which is comprised of architects, engineers, scientists, firemen, etc., it's a slam dunk case. They will prove that those buildings were brought down by controlled demolition and not by jet aircraft impact damages or jet fuel fire. So there you go, the Lawyers Committee right there. And so what we're doing, I'm in contact with their board of directors, and I've talked to them several times, and they know exactly what we're doing out here right now. And I have to say, they don't legally represent us. They don't even endorse yet what we're doing. They're remaining neutral necessarily. So, but they know what I'm doing, and if we can get enough pilot testimony and present it to them, they're going to move forward in the same with the same motion to appeal to a U.S. attorney to convene a grand jury investigation into our allegation that there were no Muslim pilots at the controls. The other thing I just did last month was I filed an FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, whistleblower report via their hotline, and with it, I sent a ton of information alleging that commercial jet aircraft were being weaponized with this system. And with that, I sent them a 66-page document that conclusively shows that a Malaysia Air 370 necessarily had to have been electronically hijacked. And surprisingly, I got a receipt back from them acknowledging that they had received my material. And just last week, they assigned 2 gents up in Seattle with the FAA to my case. And I was supposed to talk to them last Thursday morning their time. And they emailed me the day prior and said, we didn't realize the depth and breadth and seriousness of your allegation, and we're going to need more time to review the material. So we're pushing for the FAA to investigate this, and we're also pushing for a grand jury investigation into our allegations. So,
did the Malaysian government respond to you at all over 370?
No, when I did those 2 short 3-minute clips, they did not. I even tried to contact before he left office Mohammed Mahathir to talk to him or one of his staff about this system. But my friend Phil McConnell, I've got a page on the website dedicated to him. I mentioned he was the one that introduced me to this system in 2006 and knows infinitely more about it than I do. When it happened, officials in Malaysia, he lived in Wisconsin, gave him a first-class round-trip ticket to Kuala Lumpur, where he briefed these gents on this whole system and how it operates. And he was pulled aside and said, look, if this can ever be proven, it'll be the first $1 trillion lawsuit in the history of the world. So they're aware of the, some people down there are aware that this system exists. And now do you recall the Russian metro jet? I don't remember the flight number that crashed over the Sinai a few years ago in the midst of the ISIS crisis in Syria.
Yes. Vaguely, I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That made a little blip in the headlines. Not
exactly.
much.
Exactly. But we got a video on the YouTube channel as well as on that remote control page by Christopher Bolin. I don't know if either one of you have ever heard of him, but he's very, very knowledgeable on this system. And he got the flight data recorder transcripts and goes into an in-depth analysis of what exactly occurred with that airplane. Now, the U.S. and the U.K. concluded that it blew up at altitude. It was over 30,000 feet, right? And if you remember Pan Am 103 in Lockerbie, Scotland, that blew up at altitude. I mean, debris was scattered for miles, but when you look at the debris field of this metro jet, it was in a very confined area, and there was a hole in the ground. So, yeah, that's a 90, yeah, which meant it crashed. But if you look at the wild gyrations the aircraft went through in pitch prior to the pilot saying that they've lost control, and then going silent, you can reasonably conclude that it was the uninterruptible autopilot that caused that crash.
So is it possible for a pilot to lose control of his plane and not realize this thing is taking over?
I can only imagine the nightmare those pilots experience when that happened.
Oh, my God.
They can't talk to anybody. The transponder doesn't work. And as a matter of fact, I was on another program with Brendan O'Connell, and
that's a nightmare. Oh my God!
It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
So one of the things that as a Muslim scholar or somebody that's in public, not that I'm one of the ones in public, but kind of, Dr. Omar, my question is for both of you, and that is that, I have been told that when I talk to NBC's, whoever, right? I've been told, let's just talk based upon the way things are, meaning not what it really is, meaning whatever the narrative is, you should, when you're masters, you should go with the storyline. Because if I, as a Muslim, am there and talking on TV and I say this never even happened, I'm going to look like a fool, and I'm going to make things look like an idiot, and they're just going to shut me down. They're not even going to, give me 2 cents. So it's better to kind of like be apologetic. We're sorry we did this. We're sorry we happened. Islam doesn't teach this, etc., etc. Which of the 2 ways do you think, should we not do that? Should we just go to TV if we get an opportunity and Allah puts us there, or God puts us on TV? We should just say, look, this is how I feel it is, and you should go do your research, and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, if you have the podium, then you have been given the podium, and this you can say, well, this is destiny or fate or the hand of Allah, however you want to put it. But if you have the podium, then and you know what you're talking about, you then have a responsibility to speak the truth. So that is a man's responsibility and a man's response. You see, a woman would say, don't do that. Okay, we want to be safe.
But the majority of the Muslim scholars that were brought on TV, they went with the narrative. I don't know if they actually believed it.
That's because they're cowards. Okay, and that's what I'm trying to bring out here, because their cowardice is an expression of faithlessness. Okay, this cowardice is an expression of unbelief. All right, if you take the thinking logically, for example, as somebody like Al-Ghazali would do, and you carry the string of thought based on the activity forward to its logical conclusion, it means they don't believe what they say they believe, okay, with respect to the refuge and the protection and the ultimate goal of being a Muslim, okay, because Allah is the truth. So if you're going to stand there and deny the truth, you're denying Allah, okay, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's a cowardly thing to do. Now, you have the right to do that, according to Sharia, under certain circumstances, if it means imminent death. But if it merely means some sort of persecution, well, that's not the Sunnah, is it? The Sunnah is what the Prophet did. The Prophet stood up and stood for the truth and was persecuted for it. All right? So in answer to your question, I'm not going to take the woman's perspective, okay, because she's thinking about protecting the chicks. All right, the little chicks, the children. All right, and that's what she's supposed to do. But that is not the man's responsibility. The man is to stand there and to make the statement boldly, and then to also make the challenge. Okay. Now, the problem here is that today's Muslims can't stand the challenge because they know they've lost dominion. But that's on a global scale. That's on the Ummah scale. That's not on an individual scale. The individual has not lost dominion. That's why we're doing what we're doing. Okay.
That's right.
So I'm speaking in the metaphysical terms here, rising above the material realm into the spiritual realm and saying, well, this is the moral responsibility. Okay. Now, if you want to just be the materialist, you'll take the woman's perspective and say, shh, no, don't say a word because we want to stay safe. Well, that's appeasing the crocodile. Okay. Because these people are lizards. The people who designed the system that Captain Hanley just described, these are lizard-minded people. They're working at a very basic level of human understanding, but they're using their intellectual capacities in a subhuman capacity, for subhuman goals. And this is what's taking place here. The Muslim cannot enter this realm. The Muslim has to describe it, confront it, reveal it, for the world, and then let the world decide. Right now, the whole world is deciding to put on the bloody mask. Why? Well, because they're cowards. You see, I was just informed a few days ago, like we all were, about what's happening in Melbourne by some of my students. I didn't know that this lockdown has gone draconian.
Yeah.
That's a foot stomping, black booted fascist regime there now. They're going in the Bolshevik tendency in that realm. This is unconscionable. And so my response is, where are the men? Where are the beer swilling Aussie men who would never put up with such nonsense? Where are they? They're all putting on a mask and saying, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. How high do you want me to jump, sir? Would you like me to bend over while I'm at it? No. No. This is the attitude of the world's men now. And so if you're going to take that attitude, don't say a word. That's the kind of man you're becoming. And I refuse to be that man. Yeah. In answer to your question. And I think that the responsible Muslim should be on programs like this and say things like they are. Tell people the truth. And go down on record for standing for the truth. All right? Here and hereafter. That's why we're doing what we're doing, gentlemen.
Captain Dan, how has been your journey on this particular truth?
Yes, I'd like to hear that.
Let me go back to 2002 and 2003 because I didn't include it in my introduction when I said I was hired by United Airlines. I was Boeing 777 captain, actually at Newark that day when it happened, and like everybody else, I believe the official garbage that was coming out. Well, as time went on, I saw huge holes in the aviation security system and tried to I was getting a lot of pressure from crew because they were scared. And I tried to report them and I was getting blowback. But I wouldn't stop because I didn't believe the 9/11 story because there was really the security system was a farce. So I'm going to make a long story very short here. But I filed reports and I was going to send a letter to the CEO. And what I essentially was doing was exposing the frailties in the aviation security system. Well, when I brought in the Federal Aviation Administration, I was removed from schedule. I filed a federal report. I couldn't, my union wouldn't represent me and I couldn't negotiate compromise settlement to this. And shortly thereafter, they put me on sick leave. And
they stopped you from flying, Captain?
Yes. So it gets worse. I called the union lawyers and they said they're going to find a way to professionally, medically, or psychologically or otherwise ground you for life as a pilot if you keep this up. Well, I had never flunked a check ride or a physical in my life, and I knew I was psychologically sound, but I had established a huge audit trail, including tape-recorded conversations. So I went to the best psychiatrist. I was living in Atlanta at the time, psychiatrists and psychologists I could find, say, hey, here's where I am with United. Here's what they're going to try to do. Run a psyche bell on me. I'll come for counseling, which I did, whatever it takes to establish a psychological record on me, which they did. So lo and behold, I was running out of sick lists and I called my chief pilot, who was a friend of mine. I said, Bob, this is punitive now. I'm going to go non-pay. I haven't done anything wrong, but followed federal regulations. So he said, if you submit to the Employee Assistance Program, your pay will come in. It's endorsed by the FAA, the company, and the union, because the union wasn't representing me at all. And when I did this, what they did was get me to see a company-appointed shrink who declared me mentally unstable on a bogus diagnosis and grounded me for life as a pilot, because you need two pieces of paper as a pilot to fly, your license and your medical, and they pulled my medical and grounded me. And now if you jump ahead, that was in 2003, and see that sends a chilling signal out to any other pilot that would think about talking out, okay? And the word got out about me, and you jump ahead 3 years. I was talking about Phil McConnell, the expert on the system. Well, when he was trying to expose illegal modifications on Boeing aircraft, and he got pulled out of schedule. And he called me one night, I didn't know him from Adam. He called me one night out of the clear blue and said, Northwest Airlines, the union, and the FAA are trying to force me to see this notorious quack shrink in LA named Dr. Elliott. And I said, don't go, Field. It's a setup. It's a setup. Don't go. Here's what happened to me. And he retired early, 9 years early, 2 days early. I mean, two days later he did. So he could serve as an expert witness in future litigation. Now, this episode cost us each about $4 million, me in pay, pension, and stock. My wife at 27 years over a period of time left me because I got involved in another whistleblower case. My kids, who blame me for the divorce, still believe the official story and think their dad's a whacked out conspiracy nut. Don't talk to me, which is my biggest sacrifice I made. But I won't shut up. I'll be honest with you, and I'm not bragging when I say that I know too much about 9/11, the lies, to remain silent, and I won't. And my target audience is, in fact, the 1.8 billion Muslims in the world, because I believe that the message there were no Muslim hijackers at the control of the 9/11 aircraft will resonate very well with them. So we're up.
I hope to God that that Allah or God makes your path easy from here and makes your voice heard, inshallah.
Well,
the other question I have for you is that do you think that this will happen again?
Well, it depends upon what you think about the COVID. I contend that the same Zionist-owned and controlled mainstream media that has perpetuated the 9/11 lie for 19 years is also the same mainstream media giving you the COVID statistics and spikes. So I tend not to believe all the hysteria being created. I will acknowledge that it does exist and people have died. I just question the death statistics. And I believe there's an agenda being played out here that's hideous. If you want to talk about the New World Order. So
yes, let's definitely talk about that. The other question I have for you is the question that somebody would, because I'm not an expert, I don't know anything, I'm just a layman Muslim. I tell somebody, look, I believe there was an automated system that took over the planes. Is there any proof for this? I mean, that's really the premise.
Our stance is that I didn't get into the hijackers' qualifications. We got it on the website, or lack thereof. Okay, but for example, we talked about Hani Hanjo, or the pilot that supposedly hit the Pentagon. A month prior to 9/11, he was refused rental of a Cessna 172 from an airport in Maryland because he couldn't fly the airplane. So what we're saying is not what happened on 9/11, but what could not have happened, and that is these hijackers couldn't have flown those airplanes. And the only logical and viable conclusion you can draw is it necessarily had to have been the uninterruptible autopilot. I mean, we cannot say conclusively that it happened, but that's what we want investigated. We want this autopilot system investigated, and we want the reason why we believe that so many people felt.
So basically, you're bringing two things together.
Yeah.
The system exists to do this. Number one.
Right.
Okay? Number two, the people that did the hijacking couldn't have done this.
That's correct.
So when you bring these two things together, it's more logical to say that since they couldn't do it, this did it.
Right.
Meaning the system did it.
That's exactly correct, Omar.
Okay. It's a process of elimination. That's what a detective would do. And then once you eliminate what the alternative schemes are, and say you have 3 or 4 suspects and you eliminate, you get it down to just one because it's impossible for the other suspects to have done it, then you focus on this one. Okay. And that's what's taking place here, which brings me back to, I wanted to ask you about Field McConnell again, because if I remember correctly, he's not just an ordinary airline captain like you. Sorry, Captain Dan. he's a jet pilot. Okay, a jet fighter pilot. Okay, now these men are particularly intelligent, okay, and quick in cunning and knowledgeable. So can you pick Field's mind on this matter for us a little bit, since he's not available?
Can I do it right? You mean get a hold of him and come back to you?
No. Tell us what you know about his perspective.
Well, he believes that American 77 didn't even hit the Pentagon. He believes that the planes with passengers were remotely guided out over the Atlantic and blown up. He believes that an A3 Skywarrior, if you know what they look like, it's the engine's beneath the wing and resembles a mini 757. Okay, so if you painted it with American livery, he believes that that's what struck, but it fired a missile just prior to impact. There's 4 different theories on the Pentagon. 1, that a missile struck it. 2, that American 77 struck it. 3, what I just mentioned, Field believes in. And 4, that there was no airplane there and there were just explosives inside the Pentagon. And the point I always try to make is we don't address what happened with United Flight 93 that crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, or what there are people that claim there were no planes at the Trade Center and those 4 scenarios at the Pentagon. We're still strictly focusing on the hijackers themselves. Now there's Field. Field's the only guy I know that has 3 sets of wings. He graduated from the Naval Academy, went in the Marine Corps with Navy wings, Army wings, and Air Force wings. He's flown. We list his resume on that Field McConnell page, and it's very impressive. And he actually filed suit in Washington in 2007 on this whole issue, and including his forced retirement. And the judge tossed the case, of course. So I'll mention this too. I personally believe, as do others, the reason why 99% of the global population fell for the official story is they're not pilots, and they cannot conceive of the absurdity of this ludicrous notion that these inexperienced pilots that had never flown jet aircraft before, never mind a 757 or 767, could have performed these feats. And that's part of our purpose here, trying to educate.
So why is that? Why would it be difficult? I mean, I could take a car and crash it.
Well, here's what, for United American 11, they hit the North Tower. I use this analogy, and it is an original one. It would be akin to get in a huge semi-tractor trailer that you'd never driven before, get it up to 500 miles per hour, and try to drive it through a Jiffy Lube without scratching the sides of the truck. That's how accurate he would have had to have been.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
just for my audience that's around the world, and maybe Jiffy Lube, they have that entrance where you put the car in for service, right? So it's like that's very, very small, tight area, and you're going 500 miles an hour, and it's just going to go right into this very specific tight spot and come out unscathed.
Yeah. Omar, on the website, could you pull it up and go to cockpits on the drop-down menu?
Yeah, sure.
I want to show you the differences in cockpits between a Cessna 172, which is a primary training aircraft, and a Boeing 767 cockpit that they had never flown before.
So
no, that isn't it. No.
Cockpit.
Yeah, that's it. If you can scroll down, that's a Cessna 172 cockpit. Okay. You notice only instruments on one side of the panel there, and they're the old round dial pneumatic instruments. They got a few radios and a few knobs. Now, if you scroll down below that, you'll see a 767 cockpit. Okay.
Oh wow.
Yeah, you see, this is what they would supposedly jumped up, slit the pilot's throat, pulled him out of the seat, hopped in, got it up to 500 miles an hour, and was able to interpret all those instruments, and especially those flight management computers, those 2 black squares you see on the upper part of the center pedestal there. They would not have a clue, and that's the primary navigation source for the airplane. So how did they fly from the point of hijacking to their targets is beyond me. The whole story. And then at the bottom of the page, we say, do you notice any subtle differences? So that's what we're trying to point out to people: the cockpits, the hijackers' lack of experience, and the remote control situation. And at the very top of the page there, Omar, is join us.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a pilot out there and you want to contact us, it's real simple. We're just asking for your name and email address. And on the bottom, there's a comments section. And if you're a pilot, we're asking you to fill in what airplanes you flew, flight hours, et cetera. So that's a way of contacting us. And it's also for the general public. And we get a bunch of people joining us every day because the website's being read around the world. We just don't like how high the numbers are yet. And then I hesitate to mention this, but there's a donate button up there. No, we're not money grubbers trying to make money off 9/11. We do have overhead expenses for what we're doing here.
No, I understand.
And we're trying. I'm in touch with. I live in Islamabad, Pakistan, and I'm in touch with 3 documentary film producers. And what we want to do is compile the information on this website plus some, and produce a quality documentary on this on the whole website. So that's how we're trying to get the word out. But there's 7.8 billion people in the world, and we're competing against mainstream media that supports the official narrative. So that's what we're up against.
Oh, well, I wouldn't worry about the competition part. I would just keep on doing what you're doing, because my experience is that you just put these other things aside and Allah guide your step. And that's in keeping with the scriptures, because that's what Allah does. When men have met their destiny and they're certain of it and they just walk it out, Allah walks with them. Okay.
Yes.
He throws with them, but it's His cause, not ours. Okay. So
right.
we're involved in the cause of Allah here, inshallah, and this is what we do. We just keep our eyes on the path, so to speak.
Right.
I have another question for you, Dan. Go ahead,
yeah.
Omar.
No, you first.
When you are confronted by authorities, Captain Dan, when you are confronted by authorities who obviously know that they are defending a lie and that they're now dealing with a man who's defending the truth, how is that interface? I mean, how do you experience them, and how do you think they experience you?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because last April, my wife and I were planning a May trip, and we hadn't been to the States for a while. And I made reservations on Qatar Airways through Doha to Atlanta.
My grandson just joined us.
How sweet.
Okay, you have to go now. But Grandpa busy now. Okay, bye. Later.
Well, anyhow.
Yes, go on. I'm sorry about the interruption there.
Oh, no, he's sweet. That was cute. The very day I made reservations on Qatar Airways, the FBI in Washington calls my ex-wife and wanted to know everything about my trip. Now, how did they know I was going to be on that flight, right? So I said to my wife, I called the FBI in D.C. and said, what's up? Why are you asking about my trip? And they wouldn't tell me anything. So I told my wife, expect something to happen. And sure enough, when we got into Atlanta, she went over to the foreigners line. I'm in the domestic line in the passport hall. And 2 minutes later, a man and a woman escorted my wife over and said, Mr. Hanley, and they whipped their badges out. He was FBI and she was the TSA. And they said, you have time for questions? I go, sure. And so they escorted me over to a desk without a line and said, here, stamp their passports. And when the immigration officer looked in the computer, he looked up, whipped his head around the FBI officer and said, hey, you know this guy's red, don't you? Well, I didn't ask what that meant. But then they asked me to come in a room and wanted to know everywhere I was going to be, point of contact, what I was doing in the States, et cetera. But they didn't ask me anymore. So I thought, well, that's the end of that. So a month later, we're leaving the States, and we just cleared security, emptying out into a real busy concourse in the Atlanta airport. And up walks another. I mean, they recognized who I was and what flight I was on. They come walking up behind me, the FBI and TSA, and said, you have time for questions? And I go, yeah, I got a lot of time. So they took us into a room, closed the door. The FBI agent shows us his badge and says, listen, we certainly respect your 10 years of service in the U.S. military and honor your First Amendment freedom of speech rights. Have you ever been threatened? And I said, no. Why should I feel threatened? And so then he proceeds to, I said, look, I have 10,000 friends and followers on Facebook. I'm very active on social media, and I'm very outspoken on U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East and South Asia. And I don't believe the 9/11 story. And they both stood there poker face, listen to me. And I gave them some reasons why I did. And my wife buries her head in her lap, starts laughing, says he posts on Facebook. He's harmless. So I let him do what they're doing. So they knew everything about me. They knew all about my Facebook group. So they're well aware that I'm living in Pakistan and what I'm saying or doing. They know everything about me. And I could give a hoot. I keep doing what I'm doing anyhow. So as a matter of fact, I send videos like this to government officials just to let them know what I'm saying and doing. I send them the link to it.
I had an FBI agent tell me, I've seen all your YouTube videos. This is back maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago when I didn't have that many YouTube videos.
Yeah.
But I was still pretty vocal. So I can only imagine the situation.
Well, I
think I would like to also ask you about where you were taking all of this. What is the agenda? Where is all this going with COVID, with 9/11, and like, what is your feeling?
Well, I don't know what your definition of the New World Order is, but I believe they're leaning towards one world government, one currency, one religion, and by 2030 having the global capital in Jerusalem.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
Mine is about 2/3 of the population.
Oh, that too, yes.
Yeah. So there is a big cleansing coming, and I think this COVID is leading up towards that, and they will then use the post-COVID era to consolidate their positions and then create the capital in Jerusalem, because something's going to be needed, because all hell is about to break loose when people don't have enough food to eat, and they don't have any money to buy it. They're now wiping out the middle class. The middle class is disappearing. It's just evaporating.
I don't have words to say. They're killing this country. Do you know about you know that guy that was the African American guy that was killed?
Yes.
Right.
Just a few days, just yesterday or day before, they shot a man behind his back 7 times because he was. It's the camera just happens to be there, right? The same thing like in 9/11, and captures these. I mean, it's like they want the riots to occur.
We talked about this before, Sheikh. 2 months ago, 3 months ago, when we first met each other, they want the race riots.
They do.
They want these race riots. They want the gangs and even the police to wipe each other out, and it's going to get to that point because the police will not be able to match the strength of the gangs. You've got strong police force, but if those gangs get it in their mind that they're going to take the streets because they have no choice, they will take them. And they will also overcome the police force because there's just not enough of the policemen. Okay, the police cannot be everywhere at one time, and the gangs number in the millions compared to. I'm talking about the Latinos and the black gangs now, not to mention the Russian mob and whoever else is out there. God knows, we don't. Okay, the cities of America are crawling with men who serve nothing but the nafs, serve nothing but the lower nature, and they're now all armed to the teeth. And your policemen, God praise and grant refuge to those amongst them who still bear a noble heart, but most of them do not. Most of them are being trained and conditioned by the Israelis. We know that, and we know how noble they aren't. Okay, so America is getting to the point now where that last loaf of bread is going to be taken away from the local grocer's shelf, and there will be nothing to feed their children unless they take it from you.
That's right.
Okay.
And even
and the police are not going to be able to stop them from taking it.
And even those people that are patriotic and they love America, they're falling for the trick.
Yes.
They're falling for the trap, which is like the right wing people are falling for the trap, and then the left wing with Black Lives Matter are falling for the same trap and just being pitched up against each other.
The same people that fell for the 9/11 story are falling for the COVID story. Because the same media that's perpetuated 9/11 is perpetuating this story.
Yes.
And everybody's walking around with masks, and they're saying it's patriotic if you wear a mask. If you care about exactly.
Everybody's defending the lie, dear Sheikh. Everybody is defending the lie. And, the lie is going to take you straight to hell. And before you enter hell, you're going to have to enter some hell on earth. Okay. Now, what Captain Hanley has experienced is a certain amount of hellishness, but this was just a challenge, a test, if you will, of the courage that I was talking about. You see, and in order to do that, on occasion, God will take his men who have been sinners like anyone else, okay, but who have repented and then glommed onto their destiny and won't let go, and he will remove from them anybody who impedes that path, okay? And if that means your family, so be it, okay? Now, I know that there are going to be people in the Ummah who are going to be horrified by that concept, but that's the way it is. I'm talking Prophet Kidder.
Was for the Prophet.
I'm talking Prophet Kidder stuff here, okay? I'm talking the Sunnah, okay? And I know that this is the fact because I have experienced it myself. I've experienced the loss of children, etc., 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 for similar reasons as Captain Dan here. And they think I'm crazy. Okay? And then I understand. I could completely commiserate with you, but that doesn't matter to me. It matters to me personally. But as far as my destiny is concerned, as far as my dedication to the truth is concerned, it doesn't touch me at all. It's water off a duck's back. Okay, it's not that I compartmentalize it. It's that I realize what the truth of the matter really is. And in the end, they're not going to face judgment like me. You see?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I stand before the death angel, I don't want to have to say that. I don't want to be there and say, well, Omar, why didn't you speak the truth? And I don't want to have to say, well, I was afraid of my wife. You see? Or I was afraid of disaffecting myself from my children. God doesn't take excuses like that.
Yeah.
Allah does not excuse men from defending the truth because of his family. Okay. Now, there may be circumstances where you're outnumbered. Okay. And if you are confronted with two enemies and they're armed, you have to take them on. But if there's the third one behind your back and two to your front, you probably have to put the sword down and pick it up another day when you can choose a better battlefield.
Right.
You see, that's the Lao Tzu approach. But in the long term, we are obligated to do what the three of us are doing right now, and that is to seek out the truth, define it as best as we can, and then transmit it to those who will receive it. As for those who don't receive it, who don't want to hear it, they're like the family I've lost. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Farewell. Okay.
Yeah.
MashaAllah. Captain Dan, how are the people of Islamabad responding to your teachings or claims? And have you had any chance to talk to the ISI or Pakistani military?
I've had the ISI to the house twice, and they sat poker face and listened to everything I said with no comment. They said we get back to you, and they never did. As far as the Pakistani people, I haven't had that many opportunities or forums that I can get out there and talk about it. But a couple months ago, I spent a few months just because we were approaching 9/11 here. I feel like I have a narrow window of opportunity to get on the media where it's relevant. People don't want to hear about something that happened 19 years ago, especially with COVID going on. But I try to get on the media. I try to get in the print media here. Unfortunately, I don't speak Urdu, and that's a hindrance. And there's one English station, Din News here. It's national that I just appealed to try to get on. But people that are bewildered if I talk remotely controlled airplanes. You know, I have to go into detail to explain it to them. As far as the Pakistani people themselves, in spite of U.S. military, U.S. foreign policy in the area, I've been treated like a prince. They've been very, very nice to me. I was concerned coming over here initially, thinking they all hated Americans, but nothing could be further from the truth. So,
what about the pilots in Pakistan? Do you have any commerce with them at all?
Yes,
I mean, they're very good pilots. These people, they should understand these things.
There's some of the people that are coming forward. I said we're having trouble getting active airline people and active military, but I've got 3 Pakistan Air Force jet pilots, one of them with 50 years of experience, all of them which went to Pakistan International Airlines and flew big airplanes. They're all going to testify on camera, like of what I was mentioning. They all
very good.
Yeah, so we're good.
Do you think we could recruit them for a show like this?
Oh, sure. I've got a short list right in front of me. I've got them in. Hang on, let me look here. 3 in Pakistan. I got a guy in the UK, Thailand, Germany, Egypt, Kuwait, Texas, Netherlands.
Because
Australia.
Good. The reason I'm bringing this up for you, Captain Danley, and also for you, Sheikh, is that when you have an individual like Captain Dan here, and he gives a statement of a testimony, that's one thing. But and people will say, "Oh well, yeah, that's just one guy." But if you have him backed up by other pilots, okay, who say, yes, we understand this. The captain is on the right track. This is probably what happened, or whatever their professional opinion is because we're not getting professional opinions. The mainstream news is giving us opinions by non-experts.
That's actually so interesting. I've never seen actually them bring a pilot on TV.
Yeah, they won't do it. They won't do it. So if you could arrange with Captain Dan to do something like that for the sake of the Ummah and for whoever else is tuning in here, then you just replace me with 1 or 2 of these other pilots on the show and let them confirm what it is that Captain Dan is saying, especially someone who's a born Muslim. Okay, who's also a pilot. Okay, that would carry some weight, and especially if you can find a Pakistani to do it. Okay,
right.
So I'll leave it to you 2 gentlemen to carry that through. I think that would be wonderful, Captain.
Right. I actually on September 11th have another pilot coming on a program in LA. So I'm going to start doing that. I got 3 programs scheduled the next 3 days, and it'd kind of be short notice, but I might try to bring them on those programs for that very reason.
No rush here, no hurry. Oh, by the way, I just want to mention this little anecdote. The last time I was in the States was for a pastors' convention in Panama City, Florida. I was in the air from Chicago to Atlanta when the whole thing went down.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't find out until the next day because I was so tired after the flight and driving. I went right to the car rental. Then I drove from Atlanta almost to the Florida border. I found a little motel and I just collapsed. And I didn't have the radio on. I didn't have any. So I had no idea. When I got to the conference the next morning, the conference hall was empty. Everybody was in the adjoining TV rooms watching the news.
Yeah.
That's when I found out.
Wow. Well, I was only a few miles from it in Newark and slept through the thing. I'd gotten in late the night before and was scheduled to go to London that night. And I woke up at 11 something. The buildings had already come down, and I was married at the time. And my wife called me and was panicky because she knew I was in the New York area. And she goes, "It's so horrible." And I said, "Has something happened to the kids?" And she goes, "What are you talking about? You don't know?" I said, "Did something happen to the kids? What happened? Is somebody dead?"
Yeah.
And she goes, "The Twin Towers came down. They collapsed. There's one United airplane crashed in Pennsylvania. And another one hit the Pentagon. And two of them are United airplanes." And I ran over the window and threw the curtains open and saw the smoke coming out of Manhattan and about went into semi-shock. Just trying to consume all that in about a 30-second period.
Wow. I used to work for the Treasury Department at that time. It was early in the morning. It was around, I forget, whenever I came in, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. And what you have to do, you have to go through the detector. You have to put all your bags on the thing. That was there before 9/11. So one of the books I had was called 911 SMS, just by chance. Okay. Right?
Yeah.
Just by chance, I had a book called 911 SMS, and SMS is not the normal texting estimate. It meant server management services. So the guy that's, the security guy, and he sees this, he's like, "What's this book?" I'm like, "It's about what to do with servers," right? It's how to manage servers. And there's this Microsoft product called SMS. It has to do with that. So, but that was my introduction. That's how I found out something's going on. I was like, "Oh," and then he started telling me that, this 911 is, and it's just so interesting anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So the bottom line here is that we have an expert witness, a man not necessarily in the know of, whatever it is the mainstream news is hiding, but somebody who knows their field and knows it well enough to know that these patsies that were put forth by the shadow government as the perpetrators of this event could not have done it. And we know also about this automated pilot thing. What I didn't know is that this has been going on for decades, okay, going back 40, 50 years, okay? It's like boys who have this, these little remote control airplanes, and, they kind of, grow up and they get their engineering degrees and they say, "Oh, wouldn't it be fun if we could, so it's a metamorphosis of childishness. Okay, that's basically what this is. Okay, if you want to pull it down to the grassroots, basic human level psychology, that's what it is, because it's irresponsible. It's irresponsible childishness. No mature person in their right mind, no spiritually mature or psychologically mature person would design such a system.
That's true. It's
and then let alone use it. This is why I asked you the question, Captain. Has it ever been used, you see, to save lives? No, it hasn't. So the whole thing is diabolical. And this this devilishness is an expression of immaturity, because man only reaches maturity, and the jinn only reach maturity when they are in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, so this is an expression of Iblis. Yeah. Iblis never grew up. He never matured. So those people who are following his lead are the ones who also have not matured. so that they would actually design such a thing and then carry it out to perpetrate a completely and totally selfish event, self-centered event, as the exceptional ones, all right, as the chosen ones, okay? No, they've been chosen, all right. They've been chosen, yeah. And we know who you are, okay? Yeah. Don't we, gentlemen? We know exactly who they are. Yeah. So I just wanted to sort of summarize that, because we need people like Captain Dan to facilitate the evidence for what people like myself say. I mean, I look at the psychological, the philosophical, the historical evidence, but Captain Dan is in the midst of the technological evidence, all right, involved in one of the greatest mass murders, all right, in the history of the world, because this event on 9/11 not only mass murdered those people who were involved directly, but indirectly, and then the wars which it spawned, those millions, okay? This was mass murder. And what is mass murder? It's an expression of sacrifice, human sacrifice. And they're human sacrificing to their devilish leaders. Okay, to these selfish people who have never matured. And I hope they're listening in, because you are children. You have never grown up.
Okay, okay, gentlemen, thank you so much. I would go longer, but people don't have the stamina to listen more than
well, thank you very much for having me on.
I hope you come back, inshallah. I would like to discuss, the whole Jerusalem aspect and the New World Order aspect that you were talking about. That would be another interesting thing to talk about, inshallah, soon.
Could I mention that I'm also on Twitter at Dan Hanley 4?
Absolutely.
I'm real active on that. And if you're a member of the general public or a pilot, remember that join us at 911pilot.org. Yeah. And I'd appreciate anybody that would visit the site and join us there.
A real pleasure to meet you, Captain.
Pleasure to meet you too, Doctor. Thank you both. Bye-bye.
Wassalamu alaikum.